I have and will continue to place massive expectations on Lane Kiffin at LSU. He's doing everything in his power to blow past them.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. I thank you all so much, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. Darian Mensah's top wide receiver is transferring from Duke. What does that mean for that drama that continues to unfold? Oh, and by the way, Duke got a big win, but didn't get a big one, but kind of got a bit, that's the gift that keeps on giving in the offseason content world. And USC closing in on a defensive coordinator. It hits a little close to home for me and for Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 as well. But when I have discussed Lane Kiffin on this show, I have done nothing, and justifiably so, but gas up the expectations, man. It's going to be sky high. According to our friends at FanDuel, LSU's win total is already out 9.5. If he goes under and doesn't make the playoff, we don't know how many teams that's going to be yet. That's a massive, massive failure. In my book, because of what Lane Kiffin just left behind, if he does not get to the national semifinals this year, that's a letdown of a season. I won't go as far to call it a failure if they get to the quarterfinals and lose, but it's a letdown. It's falling short of what is supposed to happen. Because remember, Lane Kiffin sent a very clear message. I've got a better chance to win over at LSU. Best job in America, right? That's what some folks might say. Well, Lane Kiffin obviously doesn't care what I have to say, nor should he. But if he did, I think he'd be acting like this. LSU has been crushing it in the portal, and they're still going after the top offensive tackle. There's a serious battle for Jordan Seaton with Oregon, Miami a little bit in the fold. Oregon is seen as the biggest threat to the former five-star in Colorado Buffalo. But if Lane Kiffin pulls that one out, Just keep gassing up the Tigers. That's what I'll do. I might put the same level of expectations and pressure on them as I did Penn State this past year. Now, what does Matt Moscona of Locked On LSU have to say about this? I'll let him take it away.
Lane Kiffin is polishing off an epic portal class, maybe arguably the best portal class we have ever seen in a admittedly abbreviated portal era. But with 40 commitments already, there were two very big fish left in the pond that Lane Kiffin and his staff were targeting. One is Ole Miss edge rusher Princewill Umanmielen, and the other is number one offensive tackle from Colorado, Jordan Seaton. Take them one at a time. Umanmielen is a no-doubter as far as a prospect. 9 sacks at Ole Miss this past season, led the team. Started his career at Nebraska, was a top 100 overall prospect, and was awesome at Ole Miss this year. Now, he had already agreed and signed his rev share agreement to return to Ole Miss in 2026, but late last week announced he would enter the portal as LSU, via intermediaries, continued to pursue him. As I'm told, the buyout number that LSU is going to pay for Umanmielen is about $500,000, and then on top of that, a 7-figure rev share commitment to Umanmielen. So this is a really big get. He is a plug-and-play starter on the defensive line for LSU. Now, it was a bit contentious and tenuous because Ole Miss kind of ran LSU up against the shot clock here. They delayed pushing Umanmielen's paperwork through the transfer portal in the NCAA. The deadline for new students to enroll in classes for the spring semester at LSU was Tuesday. Umanmielen's name didn't pop up in the portal officially until in the early morning hours Wednesday. So technically, Umanmielen missed that window. What a source at LSU told me is that the admissions office was willing to make an exception because of the holdup and the delay in the paperwork. So Princewill Umanmielen is signed, and there's two components of this. There's the on-field competitive part of this, which is undeniable. He's the best edge rusher and most proven edge rusher now on LSU's team. It also weakens Ole Miss. The other component of it is financial. Is it worth that amount to pay a buyout and then to pay the player? Well, if you got the money, spend it, I suppose. It makes LSU's defense even better immediately. Now, as far as Jordan Seaton, this one is really interesting because Seaton, 5-star, number 1 offensive tackle in the portal from Colorado. Everyone agrees he's a top half of round 1 guy whenever he goes into the NFL draft. He goes into the transfer portal. He visits Mississippi State as sort of a courtesy to his former position coach, Phil Lodeholt. That was Friday. Saturday's in Miami. Sunday, he's in Baton Rouge. Monday, he was supposed to go to Eugene, Oregon, but never made that trip. Had a great visit on Sunday. LSU extended the visit into Monday. Even Lane Kiffin bringing Seaton and his uncle to the governor's mansion to meet Jeff Landry, the Louisiana governor. And LSU was pushing very hard for a commitment. My understanding is that Seaton wanted to commit to LSU. LSU very much wanted Jordan Seaton. But Seaton's uncle, who is sort of the caretaker of this relationship, was the one who put the brakes on it. As I was told, Seaton's uncle was pushing for Jordan to take a visit to Oregon, a visit that did not and has not happened. Instead, Tuesday morning, Jordan Seaton and his uncle left Baton Rouge, flew to Atlanta. Lane Kiffin, though, not laying down. He got on a plane on Tuesday night, flew to Atlanta for one more swing at Jordan Seaton, some FaceTime there late in this process. Of course, we know Dan Lanning also made the trip to Eugene, Oregon to visit with Seaton. Now, as I record this here, I'm in Houston at the Post Oak Hotel for the Bear Bryant Awards, and Dan Lanning is expected here tonight. So Lanning probably, I would assume, this is an assumption, was in Houston or diverted from Houston to Atlanta before coming to Houston to be able to go visit with Jordan Seaton. Similarly with Jordan Seaton, you're talking about a price tag that's going to go north of $3 million, an LSU portal haul that's already at 41 players, an epic financial heavy lift. Can they add a player like Jordan Seaton? Maybe the answer is, can you afford not to add a player like Jordan Seaton if he's available? LSU, this roster will go north of 30, maybe close to $40 million. And you can maybe think of Seaton as the insurance policy for your entire roster, because if something were to happen to Sam Leavitt, all the other money you spent elsewhere, in effect, doesn't matter because it limits your ability to win a championship. So the Tigers still pursuing Jordan Seaton. As I was told on Wednesday morning, that they are still working to build that trust with Jordan Seaton's uncle and land that commitment. As of now, no word, but the Tigers will still push. But it is worth mentioning that the deadline to enroll in classes for the spring semester having passed means that it would take some other type of exception from the LSU admissions office to enroll Jordan Seaton in spring classes to be eligible for spring football practice if he were to pick LSU. But it sounds like LSU, Miami, Oregon, or maybe even LSU, Oregon here jockeying as the front runners for the big number 1 offensive tackle in the portal.
Anytime you want information on an LSU, you go to Matt Moscona. But Jordan Seaton is the biggest name left in the transfer portal. The number 1 overall player, Cam Coleman, going to Texas, of course. But Jordan Seaton, when it's all said and done, we could look back and say, hey, he was one of the 3 to 5 most impactful transfers to change teams in the offseason. If LSU picks him up, Sam Leavitt's coming off an injury. Got to keep him healthy. Got to keep him protected. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, however you want to get in touch. So, if you thought Darian Mensah and Duke was done, no, guys, I think we're just getting warmed up. First, this episode is brought to you by our friends at TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. That's simple. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person, or you can connect online from the comfort of your very own home or the office like the one I'm broadcasting this show from. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. They're handling everything that you need. You can upload documents, go about your day, get updates right in the TurboTax app. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in, if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. That's the date that you got to file by. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, they'll do it this year for you for $150. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Check them out at TurboTax.com/local. The drama continues. It's not going anywhere. So Darian Mensah's leading receiver from this past year at Duke, Cooper Barkate, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, had 72 catches, over 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns for the Blue Devils in their ACC championship season. 3 years at Harvard, one at Duke. He's got 1 year of eligibility left, and he's reportedly going to enter the portal here. The old Brian Windhorst meme comes to mind. You know, that moment where he was talking about, I think it was the Utah Jazz, and he had that he puts out the fingers, one pointer finger to each side, and he just kind of leans back. I'm describing it for the audio audience, of course, and he just, why would they do that? Why would that happen? Now, when you go into the portal, you can come out at any time, and theoretically, if he wants to play with his quarterback again, who just threw the ball to him to the tune of a 1,000-yard season and an ACC championship, theoretically that could happen. He could be waiting to see. Or here's where my mind went. Would he enter the portal if he didn't think that Darian Mensah was going to be able to play at a different school? I don't know. There is the possibility as well that we have to leave ourselves open to, that these two events are entirely separate. And all of a sudden, a 1,000-yard Power 4 receiver just entered the transfer portal. Can't rule it out. Would Miami go and get both in a package deal? Wouldn't put it past them. I don't think the Canes are about to slow down their momentum with all of this. But the legal jargon, I'm not going to dive super deep into it because I don't think it makes for a very good program here. I'll just tell you what you need to know according to the legal documents and those that have reviewed them even more thoroughly than myself, where we currently stand as I record this show. It's kind of funny in a way. It's not, but it is. Mensah is able to enter the portal, but because of the contract, which has not been nullified by a settlement and was indeed signed by Mensah and his party for a 2-year deal to play for the Blue Devils, he cannot enroll at another school. He cannot play for another school. And he cannot license his NIL rights to another school because Duke has those. So, how many of you have seen Inception? Let me know in the comments below. Great movie, one of my favorites of all time. Christopher Nolan, best director of this generation. At the end, Leonardo DiCaprio's character has to go into limbo to find Saito because they were sedated too heavily. And so when Saito got shot in the dream world, instead of waking up, he went into limbo. And Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Dom, went to go save him. And he did. Who's going to go save Darian Mensah? Who is his Leonardo DiCaprio? We'll see. He's probably hoping that it's his legal team. I don't know who is watching this situation with more abated breath. Duke fans or Miami fans. Because in the midst of all of this, Duke has perhaps started to accept the possibility he won't be there next year. They hosted Winston Eget, transfer from San Jose State, 2-year starter with the Spartans. I think he'd be respectable, solid, capable. He's not the caliber of quarterback that Miami would be looking for if Mensah doesn't wind up playing for the Hurricanes in 2026. Maybe he'd be the only option left. I don't know. They've at least explored the possibility. I don't think that indicates, I think that's Duke covering all their bases. I don't think that they're hosting a quarterback is them throwing in the towel and saying, no, we're just not going to be able to keep him here. Because this is actually, on the whole, at the moment, a win for Duke. Now, they haven't gotten the outcome that they are seeking just yet, because, of course, what they would like is for Mensah to pull a Damon Williams and say, you know what, I don't want to deal with this. I was wrong. I made a mistake, and try to mend that relationship. Because, yeah, you'd rather bring back the leading passer in the ACC than just let you do a conference championship. That would indeed be situation A for the fine folks in Durham. Well, in this scenario, I should say. But this just keeps unfolding. It's not going anywhere. By the way, do not be surprised if Trinidad Chambliss has an announcement on that front in the next couple of days. Heck, that could drop on Thursday, and I can almost guarantee it'd be the lead segment on my Friday show. So all these legal battles and debates and whatnot, I think for college football fans, broadly speaking, at some level you have to just embrace and accept it, that this is going to become commonplace. Because as I've laid out before, I don't think this is high in the list of priorities for all the changes that are going to arrive in college football. I think you're going to have a playoff format. You're going to have a playoff television deal. You might have some calendar changes. Where in all of that, and from which authority, does the enforcement of NIL deals that are signed come into play so that schools can stop, suing their quarterbacks to not leave? Where does that come from? I don't know. I hope it arises, because I don't think this stuff is good for fans, which is who I'm always thinking about and looking out for here on this particular program, because I am a college football fan, and that's who the sport is really for. Remember the COVID season? Some places had limited capacity. Some places played football games in front of cardboard cutouts. It didn't even feel like football. It technically was. If you're not doing something to serve fans, you should ask yourself why you're doing it. The answer is usually money. And I'm sure that's the case here for Darian Mensah. He's not thinking about the Duke fans. I think he's thinking about the opportunity to go play for a team that was just in the national championship game and was one drive away from winning the whole darn thing. And he's thinking about the fact that he just got $4 million for his first year at Duke. I don't know if the contract says that that's null and void if he, opts out of it after a year. I wouldn't think so, because that would be making less money. Like if the offer from Miami were, let's say, $6 million, if you were foregoing, I don't think that's how it works. Anyway, the opportunity to make a couple million more dollars, a lot of money. It's a lot hard to say no to that sort of cash, but this will not be the last time. I'd like to think that the Duke wide receiver, Cooper Barkay, going into the portal isn't connected. I just wonder, Blue Devil fans, because again, this was a win. This was a win for Duke. that Mensah can go in the portal, but he can't enroll in a school until this is ruled upon, which is going to happen in the next couple of weeks. I think one thing everybody can agree on, we'd like for this to get figured out so that everybody can move on from it mentally and assess, okay, what's our plan of action? Who's Duke getting at quarterback? Where is Mensah actually going to wind up? When can that whole process get going? I hope we can all agree on that part of it. So leave your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, however you want to get in touch. USC is making a run at a college football legend. And I love it, but I also hate it. This has not officially happened as I'm recording this show, but it appears, according to reports, like USC is moving towards hiring Gary Patterson, last seen on Locked On's very own Amazon College Football Kickoff show, to be their defensive coordinator. That's the only reason, honestly, that I would hate this. Because Gary Patterson's great on the show. And I've interacted with him there. He's great. Gary's awesome. If I were a USC fan, I would be cautiously optimistic about hiring Gary Patterson. So the last time that Gary Patterson was actually a coach was 2021. Now in 2022, he was special assistant to the head coach at Texas. He was a consultant at Baylor. He only knows, and the people he worked with, how much he was actually doing in those particular roles. This is a guy, though, whose defensive pedigree during his more than 2 decades coaching for TCU was very well established. And there were a number of reasons why he got out of college football. I'm always slightly hesitant to get all the way on board with a guy that hasn't done it in a little while. Like, are there going to be some bumps and bruises? Is there going to be a stage of remembering how to do this? Because here's the other thing you have to consider. USC has got some pieces. If Gary Patterson takes this job, though, he's not inheriting a defensive roster that's just ready. I mean, just don't screw it up. They're losing guys to the NFL draft. They were a good team on that side of the ball this year. They were not great. They have improved significantly. It's nice to see Lincoln Riley, if you're a USC fan, taking a serious interest in this side of the ball, because for the first 2 years with Alex Grinch, he didn't care really at all, and that was to the detriment of the program. D'Anton Lynn was a good, serious defensive coordinator hire. You catch a bad break, he goes and gets hired to Penn State because James Franklin imploded after losing to Oregon earlier this year, and D'Anton Lynn goes back to be a defensive coordinator at his alma mater. Yeah, that might have been one of the few on a list of perhaps 5 jobs that as a coordinator, especially a defensive coordinator, you would rather have than USC. There are others. There are not that many, especially with Lincoln Riley there. You are the head guy. He's not, peering over your shoulder. He's not controlling. No, you get to run the show. You get to run the show on that side of the ball because Lincoln Riley's paying all of his attention to the offense. So there's definitely some work to be done. Gary Patterson has to learn and navigate the NIL and transfer portal space, because that's not something that when he was last a head coach at TCU, I'm not doubting his football mind one bit. If Kyle Whittingham had been away from Utah since 2021 and Michigan hired him, I wouldn't be doubting his mind in there either. Just because he was more successful in a previous era, I think that's more about, the bigger question would be, can he be a head coach in the modern world when you have NIL in the portal? You still have to learn that sort of stuff as a defense coordinator, but I don't know that you have to major in it or do as many different things off the field as you used to. But schematically, Yeah, I think it's fair to have the question still. Do I like Gary Patterson? Yeah, on a personal level, I do. I'm going to try to get him on the show. Hopefully, we'll be able to make that happen once he formally accepts the job, I hope. But I think USC could have done a lot worse here. Did it surprise me a little to read that this is the avenue they were going down? Yeah, it definitely did. They were going after Texas's former defensive coordinator. That didn't end up working out. He might just not be coaching for a little while. Were there other names that came across my mind that made me go, that could make sense for USC? Yeah, there were. But when I hear Gary Patterson, what do I think of? The TCU was the only defensive team in that era of Big 12 football. Architect of the 4-2-5, which is the archetype of players that USC's recruited over the last several years. So, do I think they have the best personnel defensively in the Big Ten? No. I don't even know that they have defensive personnel as good as what is it the other teams, frankly, that they want to compete with next year. But once Gary Patterson gets into the swing of things, I think he could do well. So I think it'd be a really fun hire, and we'll see if it winds up getting made official. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.